Thanks for having me. This is kind of a cool space. I'd like to take a class in here. It's kind of cool. So nice to meet you all. I see some familiar faces from the other campus over there. As Ann said, I teach at the business school. I teach entrepreneurship. I teach social entrepreneurship and marketing. I've been teaching a bunch of years. I think this is my 8th or 9th year. I grew up on the East Coast, went to MIT, went to Harvard Business School because Stanford didn't let me in. I would have come here. I spent 7 years at Microsoft. I did a variety of things. I started MSN. I actually worked for Gates a little bit before that directly. It was kind of fun. Then I came down here in the Valley in '96. I became a partner at Kleiner Perkins, which is one of the sort of Tier A venture firms up on Sand Hill. I worked there as a partner for 11 years, I think 4 funds. So I saw a lot of venture deals, probably. I personally invested in 25 or 30, but I saw 200 plus in my 11 years there. I did some of the original due diligence on Google. I went to some of the first board meetings at Amazon, whatever. It was all fun. And then, again, I teach here, and I do a variety of other things. I do a lot of social venture stuff. I'm the board chair of a new $200 million impact fund, which invests in social ventures to sort of change the world and so forth. And I'm also an active angel investor. So a lot of what I'm going to talk to you today is about my experience actually investing in startups. I do that all the time. Since I left Kleiner, which is roughly 8 or 9 years, I made 45 investments of my own money in startups. So I kind of know what goes on in the world these days. So I bought a whole bunch of slides. I actually don't intend or want to go through all of them. I know you guys know a bit about lean startup stuff, and so I bought some stuff on lean startup. That's what I teach, that's what I believe in, that's what I invest in. And then I also bought some slides on how to pitch your projects if you're going to go raise money, which you might want to. But I'll kind of sense about looking at your expression why this is either slides are boring or interesting, and then I'll go either fast, or if you have questions, please let me know. All right, so what we teach in Startup Garage is a mixture of lean startup, customer development, which is kind of, that's Steve Blank's thing, and he teaches here, but we backed him several times actually at Kleiner. His last venture, Epiphany, was a big success, and we got to know him quite a lot at Kleiner, and we became kind of fans of him. I did anyway, and then he wrote this book called 4 Steps to Epiphany. Notice the connection between his last startup and the name of the book. And that became this idea of customer development. And then one of his sort of disciples, Eric Ries, wrote this book about lean startup, which was based on customer development. So we teach all of this stuff in Startup Garage. I think it's kind of the only, it's not for every kind of venture, but the kind of ventures you're likely to start, it's the way to do it. And when I invest, probably 99% of the companies I invest in use that kind of methodology. So what we start is to kind of motivate why it's good, why people do it. And the basic idea is that, look, startups are not like big companies. There's no track record. There's no success with customers. There's no clear, when you start, clear path to what we call product market fit. Product market fit is this basic idea that, the dogs want to eat the dog food. Your customers want your product. And all of that uncertainty leads to bad planning assumptions. When I first got into the venture business a long time ago, they used something that was more like, so the question is, what do you do? How do you plan if you have no assumptions? So one thing people used to do is just, hey, I know it right, just trust me, I'll build it and people will come. That's kind of the field of dreams. But more often, when I got into the venture business, it was more what we called waterfall planning. So the idea behind waterfall planning is sort of like, hey, I'm going to show you a plan, and the first stage, let's say the first 2 years, you're going to give me a bunch of money. It could be $2, $3, $4 million bucks. I'm going to hire some engineers, and at the end of that 2 years, I'm going to have a product. Okay, you can believe me or not, that's sort of the basic idea, and here are the assumptions. Then after that, we're going to start selling it. We're going to get it to some point in the market. That's going to cost another bunch of money, so we're going to raise another $5 million. That's going to last 2 years, and then we're going to have a raging success, and we're going to raise $15 million. It's all going to go off to the right, and everything's going to work. So when I first got in the venture business, well, that's almost 19 years ago, that's kind of how we did business. We would get this long 25, 35 page, maybe sometimes 50-page plan, and it would have these kind of Gantt charts. It would have all these assumptions, and it would say, give us 2, 5, 3, probably not 2, more like 3, 4, $5 million. We'll hire a bunch of engineers, we'll build something. In 2 years from now, we'll sell it to some customers, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so what are the problems with that? Well, in the last slide, as I pointed out, you have no idea what customers are going to think of your product. You're investing $3 or $4 or $5 million in 2 years worth of engineering time before you even get any market signal, right? Not a good deal for investors, right? Definitely not a good idea for investors, but it's actually not good for you either. That's 2 years of man work or women work, depending on what gender you are, sweat equity, that you don't actually know whether customers want your product. So this, believe it or not, this bugged a lot of people, including me. But there was no good way, I think, to kind of really get around it until a few things happened. One was the cost of prototyping products became much, much cheaper. Like now you got all these cloud services, you got all these tools to build stuff, and the market, meaning customers, got much more sensitized to the idea that entrepreneurs were testing out ideas with them before they were ready. Now that doesn't mean customers were willing to buy stuff before they're really built, but it means they were willing to sort of try things earlier in the product lifecycle. The combination of all those things led people like Steve Blank and Eric Ries to say, aha, why should we raise a lot of money and spend 2 or 5 years, or 2 or 4 years with lots of money and lots of engineers before we know whether there's a market signal that people want our product? So they inverted the model. So this kind of waterfall model was really what everybody did back in the day, but very few people do it now. And you think about it, like if I'm an investor, would I rather know before I write you a $5 million check whether some customers want the product or not? And of course, we all did want that back then, but the way we found out is we called a few people. And one thing that's sort of the whole hypothesis-driven or lean startup approach takes sort of a divergence from the old view of like calling people for due diligence. They can say whatever they want, right? The difference between what marketeers call revealed preferences and stated preferences are quite different. And what people say and what they do, that means is quite different. So we used to get these reference calls. People say, yeah, they love this, they like that. And it was even harder. It was much harder to do for consumer products, right? I'm going to write a focus group of people, and they haven't really seen the product. They can't use the product. But they say, oh, yeah, I would love something like that. But of course, when the product came out, they didn't actually do what they thought, or maybe they didn't really like it as much as they thought, or maybe the price was wrong. So basically, the whole idea here is you don't necessarily take people's word for it. You go out and you actually, so this is the basic idea, and I think you've had this before, you develop hypotheses about what people want and what your business is going to be, and then in a really sort of low-cost, quick feedback cycle loop, you go out and you test it, okay? There's a lot of stuff about this. So, basic idea is to learn and fail fast if you need to, or learn and sort of iterate and continue. But the thing that really changed things, and these are the two books that, if you want to read these are sort of the two Bibles. This is one I referred to Steve Blank, 4 steps. So Epiphany, basic idea of customer development, try to sell the product before you build it. And Eric Ries sort of took it to the next level. This is where I was about to go. Not just try to sell it before you build it, but try to build it in small, incremental, cheap process steps. And that's the idea of what you call, looking for the slide where I talked about this. You build MVPs, very simple products, and you put them in front of customers. What I would call low-resolution products. So low resolution that traditionally people would say, that's not even a problem. You can start at Garage. Literally, we have students build things with paper clips, homemade videos, whatever it takes to embody the basic product concept in as cheaply and quickly as possible and get it in front of customers. Does that mean they buy it? No, it doesn't. But is it better than just asking them, would you like X, Y, and Z? In our experience, it's way better. And then, of course, once you sort of get feedback, you get some market signal that people might like this, you build higher resolution. You don't go build a final product, you build a slightly better one, and you take them in front of customers again. again, and you learn again. So this is this kind of rapid prototyping, this kind of learning from customers. And you kind of go through this many times. And by the way, I'm sort of suggesting you do this around the product, and that is certainly one of the key things to kind of get the product market fit. But as this sort of whole theory has evolved, you create hypotheses not just about the products, but also about other aspects of your business. So for example, you might think, well, look, who's going to sell this product? I need to sell it at retail. It's a consumer product. So what hypothesis might be that a certain retailer, I don't know, Radio Shack, actually Radio Shack's a business now, but Radio Shack will carry my product. Products, electronic retailers will carry my product. Well, so what might you do is you might actually walk into them with a very low resolution prototype, or maybe a very slick piece of paper that looks like a data sheet. And you might say, hey, we're going to have this product on the market, cost to you at X in 6 months. How many units do you want to buy? Try to sell it before you even have it. Say, well, I can see it before you know it. But the point is, can you get people to give you a market signal before you actually done all the work and money and time to build it? And you can do this kind of thing, again, certainly between you and the customer, you need to do, but there are lots of other hypotheses you do. Like, for example, another hypothesis is, can you actually build this thing at a cost point that will allow you to sell it at retail, let's say, below 150 bucks? Maybe that's an important price point. Well, so what we would ask you to do is create a bill of materials based on your best knowledge about what you're going to build, take it over to China, and see if they actually will give you a price quote that will get you at $90, right? If you think, now I can actually build it at $90, I have retail margins of whatever, 30 bucks, whatever, I can actually make $25 if I sell it for $149.99. Aha! So I know I learned something. But the other response to that task might be, you go to China and they say, hey, I want you to build something that looks like this, here's the bill of materials. And I say, oh yeah, that'll cost you $280. Well, you know what? Before you actually go through the work of building it, you might suggest, maybe we actually need to rethink the product, or maybe we need cheaper materials, or we need a different supply chain. So that's basically the idea here. Any questions with the basic idea here? No, people kind of heard all this before I figured. So lots of stuff here. I don't know if we need to go through. Basically you build these hypotheses. You try to find out whether they're true or not. Eric talks about like the best ones are ones that are falsifiable and are measurable, right? Because like this is all guesswork. And I'll give you an example. So like a lot of people do Kickstarter campaigns now. Like so, I'm going to ask you like, what is a successful Kickstarter campaign? If you were going to run one, what would a successful Kickstarter campaign be? There's no bad answer. Just tell me. Like, what's a successful Kickstarter campaign?
The first one I can think about is that weird one that just got all that money. What was it? Something about cats.
Okay, but aside from what kind of product is, like, how many units or how much money would you say a successful one is? Yeah. Anybody? Yeah.
$100,000.
$100,000.
Yeah.
150.
Enough to replace your funding goals, like enough to replace like another.
Okay, but how do you know what your funding goal should be? I guess my point is, see, this is a good example of why Eric says you have to have very firm metrics going in. Because let's say you run this campaign, right? You put it up there, and you get 100,000 worth of units, like pre-sale. You say, that was really awesome. But what if you go in and you say, $100,000 worth of sales, that's only 100 or maybe even like 50 purchases. And I think like, given what I know about Kickstarter, is 50 sales actually a market signal that actually people really want the product, or maybe there's like a fringe market? So my point only is that before you run a test, Eric suggests, and I would agree, you want to have firm metrics about what's success. And it's easy. The thing about, I don't know if I had it on one of these slides, but the thing about entrepreneurs is they have biases. Everybody has biases, but because entrepreneurs are people, you have biases. And one of the biases is optimism. You want your idea to succeed. So if you run a test and you don't set up ahead of time what you think success will be, you can always interpret the feedback that you get as positive, right? It's all good. Like 50 people bought my product. It's awesome. But if you step back and say, look, let's look at all the Kickstarter projects that are like mine. This is sort of called taking outside view. And on average, they were able to get 500 orders. Then I say, going in, if I don't get 250, something's wrong. So 50 might not actually look so good in retrospect. But the point is, you really want to have this good sense before you go into a task, and you really want to stick to it. And, be disciplined. If 50 is a bad mark and you get 50 back, don't just keep going. Think about, do I need to do something different? All right, I'm going to skip ahead a bit. So here's something I think this is true of all entrepreneurs, whether you're using Lean Startup or not, but it's sort of built into the sort of Lean Startup model. I think, there should always be a bias in entrepreneurialism, and certainly with respect to sort of getting market signals, to focus on sort of getting some trade, meaning getting some bias towards action. Again, I said earlier, it's easy for people to say things, but you want to see the level of interest, because time is money and attention is time. So if you can get people's attention, that's worth something. That's some kind of market signal. We have all of these different tricks we use at Startup Garage, like get people to sign a letter of intent. Well, even if it's not binding, it shows they've actually read something and willing to commit to it. If you're willing to give them a product for free, which a lot of times you do at the beginning, particularly like business kind of products, get something in return. Well, what? Maybe not money, maybe not willing to pay. They won't say they pay, at least until they do make it work. But they might say, if it works, I'll give you a joint press release. That says something. It says they're going to be focused on trying it. Because if you show up and ask for a press release, they're going to have to be able to respond to that. So, this bias toward some kind of action with customers is always a good thing. So I don't know. This is just kind of a summary of things. So I'm gonna move into the pitch section. But any questions about this kind of Lean Startup model? How you operationalize it? What people do? No questions? Yeah, there's one.
How do you control for bias when you're testing people? Because it's easy to go and ask your friends. It's easy to go and ask your peers. How do you control?
That's a great question. So one way you control that is by not just asking your friends, which is it sounds like a no-brainer, but the truth is that's what most people do, at least really at the beginning. There's this sort of phrase in the sort of startup world called getting out of the building. Steve Blank kind of sort of coined that phrase. To me, that just means you got to do something that it's a little bit out of your comfort zone. If you're just talking to people who are going to give you, I really like your product, because he's your friend, that's not a real data point. Now, the further you get away from your comfort zone, maybe the more real the signal is, but you always have to be careful. Frankly, anytime you talk to somebody, in my view, unless they're kind of mean people, they want to please you a little. Right? It's hard to reject them. So there's always a bit of bias when you hear from people. But certainly, the more you get away from your friends and family, the better it is. Now, there's also the question of sampling and the sample size. The more people you talk to, the better. But even with this kind of thing, some people will tell you, oh yeah, do statistically valid surveys. In my view, that's actually not necessarily any better than this kind of work. Because a lot of what you need in the beginning is you need to be able to know the right questions to ask. The problem with surveys, what's the problem with surveys? You define the question. And if the question's the wrong question, you don't get the right answer. So what we do at Startup Garage, we would never tell you to start with a survey. Getting face-to-face with lots of people, interviewing them, observing them. I think, Ann said you've already sort of talked about the human-centered design process. The beauty of the human-centered design process is you can potentially discover these sort of unstated preference without actually kind of getting somebody to write it down, right? That's the whole beauty of human-centered design. That's why we teach at Startup Garage. We teach human-centered design. It's the first whole section. We call it need finding, but it's human-centered design. Because the idea is to sort of reveal these preferences that maybe the person might know, but they're not salient, meaning they're not the first thing they tell you about, but also maybe they don't even know themselves, right? So that's kind of the thing you want to do to kind of get away from the bias. Yeah?
In your view, so say we're going into interviews and we have an idea of what we want our startup to be. So we have an idea of a target user. Would you recommend treating all interviewees equally, or are you more biased towards the target users and spend more time interviewing them? How do you look at
Yeah, that's a great question. So I want to comment on two things there. I want to comment on what you asked for, how you engage with them initially, and also then maybe the second question is sort of where to select the target audience. So the first thing I want to say though is when we start in this process at sort of Garage, and I'm a big believer in this, I actually probably think this is probably the biggest failure of entrepreneurial processes is you got to start with the need, not the solution. Everybody comes to this, like, I have an idea. Okay, and you need to have an idea. You need to have a vision. But you need to focus on what people want, not what you think they want. And if you come with, like, here's the thing I want to build, you've already biased them. You're showing them the solution. What you want to do is you really want to understand what the need is. And so human-centered design, again, is the way to do that. So open-ended questions at the beginning, focus on the need. I mean, we have a whole quarter, like a whole week, where we tell students all you need to do is really get deeply engaged in the problem. Understand the need. Don't worry about the solution. Now, again, along the way, we do brainstorming to come up with solutions, and lots of teams do build solutions, and we want you to build MVPs, which are kind of solutions. But even at the beginning, the reason to have an MVP, a low-resolution prototype, in my view, is not to come up with a solution. It's to further probe the need, right? If you show somebody a solution, initially, you shouldn't be too focused on, like, is it the right solution? I mean, you want to ask that, but really what you want to hear is, how are they thinking about the problem, not the solution? So the first thing I want to say is, whatever you do with customers, especially early in the process, I would focus highly on the need, okay? The second question is, who do you want to talk to? And you will get more biased answers. Like, for example, people who really understand the need, we call them early adopters or extreme users, depending on what language. And actually, we love those people, right? Because if the need is very salient for them, in other words, it's top of mind, like, and a lot of times, even better, they've tried to solve it and they couldn't solve it. Like there's a famous D-school picture where somebody's got a door jam, got something jammed under a door that looks like it shouldn't be a door jam because they didn't have a door jam, right? There's a whole bunch of pictures like that. There's another picture of somebody suspending a tea bag out of a cup of tea because they didn't want it hanging all over the side. So my point is, you can find people who tried to solve a problem but not well. They're awesome because they'll tell you everything about the need, which is what you want. The problem with a lot of users is, like, they don't have the need or they can't articulate it because it's not salient for them. So you won't get as much of it. So if you find an early adopter / extreme user, you mine it to that. Now they're biased for sure. So I'm not saying you should take everything they say and say we need to build a product just for them, but it's a great way to explore the need space. Then based on that, you go back and say, okay, which of these things that I've learned are really the kind of things I want to focus on for the mainstream customer? Because maybe you don't want to build something just for that person. But people who are extreme users, who are going to be the early adopters, they are great. And that, by the way, that's one of the things that I think Kickstarter is great for. I don't think Kickstarter is necessarily great. It's definitely a good way to raise money because you can't really raise much money that way. I don't think it's that great for, I think the best thing is you can get in touch with early adopters, right? You can get feedback from them. They'll tell you lots of feedback on why they like it. You can send them, they're the kind of people to say surveys with lots of open-ended questions because they'll send you lots of feedback. They love your product, they love your idea, they want to tell you about it. They're awesome. And historically it's really hard to find those people. Kickstarter's made it a lot easier. Other questions? Yeah.
How do you think about monetization versus building kind of a big user base? Because it seems like here it's all about building a user base and not thinking about monetization.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like, when do you start thinking about monetization, and how do you believe what people tell you about?
Yeah.
How they
Okay.
can monetize?
So as I said earlier, like, one of the things we talk about using these startups is not just getting the product market fit, but getting all aspects of your business viable. So we use this thing called the business model canvas. I didn't actually bring it here, but it's like a graphical representation of all the key aspects of your business model, including how you're going to make money, like where the revenue comes from. And look, there are some businesses that have high network effects, and it's hard to charge people for Twitter. Like, would you pay even a dime for Twitter? Well, especially until you've never used it, you never would, right? Maybe now you would pay small amounts, but it's not that kind of thing. So for businesses like that have high network effects and it's hard to extract money, yeah, it's all about users. You've got to build a big audience, and then you can figure out how to monetize them. Some companies do that using advertising. Some use it using freemium models. Evernote is really good that way. They have lots and lots of free users, and they get some of it for paying. So if you have that kind of business, and if your business model canvas lays out like, okay, my revenue is going to require a big audience, then yes, that makes sense. But for lots of other businesses, it's nonsense to build businesses, build big audiences if you can't extract money from them, right? So in other businesses, you might say, look, this is the kind of product I'm going to need people to pay for. Now, I'm not saying you should charge day one, but pretty early on, it's one of those things like Eric would say, or I would say, that's a key hypothesis. Don't wait until much later on to find out nobody's willing to pay for something if that's required for your business model. The sooner the better. All right, any last questions? We'll go, but I have another, 15 minutes? Yep. Okay. We'll do some pitches, slides on the pitching. So, these are sort of slides I've used before, and actually some of them are from Startup Garage, not all of them. And I do think it's interesting because things have changed a ton in how you do these pitches over the years that I've been a venture capitalist and now an angel and so forth. It used to be, you would show up or send over an email like this 25-page, 35-page pros plan, and it had all these detailed estimates in it, like a 5-year project, 5-year financial plan, and so forth. We counsel people at Startup Garage don't do any of that anymore, right? Like as an angel, I wouldn't even read such a thing. I haven't even seen one for 10 years, right? So what you do now is kind of what I'm going to tell you, kind of tell you to look, to think about. Everybody does it slightly differently, but more or less, this is kind of what I've seen in the market. So a pitch usually is about 30 minutes max. So that, if you average sort of 2 minutes per slide, it can't be much more than 15 slides. So if you show up with angel pitch with 50 slides, I guarantee you that's not going to go well. Okay, so 15 slides max. It means you've got to be concise. Be focused on high points. Focus on the problem and your solution, the opportunity, and the team. We'll talk about all of this in a bit more. These are the key things you want to focus on. This is probably, if you want to take nothing else, this is probably the most important thing. All presentations are not a download of everything you know about your idea or what you learn in your human-centered design process or the competition. It's not a download. It's got to be a story. You got to start with a hook right off the bat. Within seconds, you want this person to be focused on what you're telling because you created a little bit of a riddle. Why are, I just came from a team at Stanford Business School that I'm working with, and their riddle is, why is it that millennial brides, women between, 22 and 35, don't want to buy wedding dresses the way their, older generation does. I'm not doing it right, but, and literally, within one slide, she captured this conundrum really well, and now I'm interested. Why? And of course, what do you think the answer is? Her company will address it, right? Here are the problems, and here's how you're going to address it. So you got to tell a story, and you got to start right from the beginning to kind of create a hook. Now, the next thing that's just as important is most people in the world, unless you're a well-known, famous entrepreneur already, you'll be viewed as who are you? You have no credibility, right? So the only way you're going to get credible is providing evidence. For everything you say, it can be viewed as an assertion. Assertions are not good. You have no credibility with me, you assert something, I don't care what you say. It goes in one ear, out the other. But if you support your assertion with evidence, and there's lots of different kinds of evidence we'll talk about, but numbers, quotes, pictures, and by the way, I'm not saying this is rock solid evidence. It's not like validated by the Supreme Court to be correct. It's just more than just you saying it, right? Another analyst is quoted saying, well, he or she may not be right, but it's not just you saying it. A customer saying, this is a real problem. It's one customer and one quote, which no one's ever going to validate. But anything like that lends credibility. So you really want to do that. So you want to tell a story, and you want to provide evidence to support it. And the last thing, make it visual. If it's lots of text on a slide, it's too much. They won't listen to you, right? When you're presenting, you want people to talk at the beginning. Tell people what it is you want them to take away. That's what this is here. Then you talk maybe about the team, and then quickly within I would say it's got to be within the first 5 minutes, maybe even the first 4 minutes. You got to tell people what the need is. Like, what is the problem you are trying to solve? And this has to be rich. I mean, this is why need finding is so critical. If you can't explain to me that there's a real market need right now, I'm probably going to lose interest quickly. But once you've sort of teed up that riddle, what the need is, then tell them right off the bat how you're going to address it. Then you need to put in some kind of circle back and say, okay, so now you know what we're doing. So what's the context that we sit in?